The Gaza ceasefire is over, and now the IDF is continuing to pursue what they say are their war goals. The Israeli Air Force struck multiple Hamas and Islamic Jihad sites over the last 24 hours, eliminating key figures in Hamas's leadership. Here's more with ILTV's Devo Klein.
IDF Air Force fighter jets took off overnight and carried out swift and precise airstrikes across the Gaza Strip. The IDF said it targeted dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad positions and eliminated key figures. Among those eliminated was Issam al-Da'alis, the head of Hamas government in Gaza. The IDF also confirmed the elimination of 3 officials who all held key roles in Hamas's internal security and governance. The IDF also announced it struck a Hamas military site in northern Gaza, where preparations were being made to fire projectiles into Israeli territory. Israel's foreign ministry spokesperson reiterated the goals of the war and the cause for the strike's renewal.
The IDF is striking Hamas terrorist targets across the Gaza Strip, aiming to achieve the war's objectives, which include the release of all our hostages, the dismantling of Hamas military and governmental infrastructure, and the removal of the terrorist threat from Gaza to Israel's security and its citizens.
The Israeli Navy also took part in the renewal of strikes, striking several vessels which they say were intended to be used for terror operations by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. In his address to the nation last night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Palestinians in Gaza to get out of harm's way, to avoid Hamas, and evacuate to safe areas. He also blamed Hamas for the failure of the Doha negotiations, claiming they are the reason for the renewal of the war and any civilian casualties that follow. The IDF's new chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, visited troops in Rafah to discuss operational plans. Zamir added to the soldiers that their mission is to protect the communities in the Gaza envelope.
Thanks so much, Devo, for that report. Now, Netanyahu vows to increase force against Hamas, saying, quote, "This is just the beginning." Now, after surprise airstrikes began overnight into Tuesday and now leading into Wednesday morning, the Prime Minister is saying negotiations will now take place only while the terrorist organization is under fire. Here's what else he said in a recorded televised statement.
Israel will fight, and Israel will win. We will bring our people home, and we will destroy Hamas. We will not relent until we achieve all these vital goals.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing continued intense force against Hamas after he says the terrorist organization refused every offer to release the hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip.
In the past 2 weeks, Israel did not initiate any military action in the hope that Hamas would change course. Well, that didn't happen. While Israel accepted the offer of President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, Hamas flatly refused to do so. And this is why I authorized yesterday the renewal of military action against Hamas.
There were deadlocked talks in Doha and Cairo after a new U.S. proposal by Steve Witkoff, and afterwards, Hamas announced last week they would release the only Americans still believed to be alive, Idan Alexander, and the bodies of 4 Americans. But officials rejecting it, saying Hamas was not sticking to the proposals on the table. Meanwhile, Hamas officials say Israel failed to fulfill its commitments to the Phase 2 of the ceasefire deal, claiming it led to the breakdown in talks. Therefore, stalemate conversations led to intense airstrikes in Gaza, where Palestinian media reports more than 400 people were killed, although it does not differentiate civilians and terrorists.
Israel does not target Palestinian civilians. We target Hamas terrorists. And when these terrorists embed themselves in civilian areas, when they use civilians as human shields, they're the ones who are responsible for all unintended casualties. Palestinian civilians should avoid any contact with Hamas terrorists. And I call on the people of Gaza, get out of harm's way, move to safer areas. Because every civilian casualty is a tragedy. And every civilian casualty is the fault of Hamas.
And as Israel enters its second day of airstrikes in Gaza since January, the government says they are now continuing their war objectives of defeating Hamas while also working to bring the hostages back home. Now, joining us now to discuss is retired Colonel Itamar Yaar, the former deputy head of the National Security Council. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
So my first question to you is, the government says one of the objectives of this war is to completely defeat Hamas. We know that key leaders have recently been eliminated in the most recent airstrikes that took place over the last few days. But how likely is it that Hamas will be defeated?
It's a big question. I don't think that you can defeat Hamas as a title. You can try, and this is what the Israeli side tried to do, is to dismantle Hamas as an organization, as a body that can give orders, that can implement all kind of terrorist activities, can organize recruitment of more and more people as the only option that these people have. Mm-hmm. If the Hamas can give them some money, they will join him. They can give them, it's enough to have a Kalashnikov, an RPG, and you have a Hamas activist. This is the main Israeli way to try to dismantle Hamas activity against Israel, and in the other hand, to try to push Hamas to understand that their interest is to release the hostages. Can it be achieved? It's a question, but there is another thing that we need to take by consideration. Anyway, if this is some kind of real opportunity or not, the lives of the hostages are under real threat from both sides. First of all, from Israeli strikes, even though I believe that the Israeli side will not attack any area that, as far as we know, there are no, or there are hostages there. But there is another risk, and this is more dangerous, that, it's enough to have one Hamas activist that hold kidnap Israeli, that he will decide, even without any orders, as a revenge, to kill the Israeli hostage that he has. And this is a real risk, and I'm sure that the Israeli public and mainly the families themselves are terrified from that.
Now, something interesting Netanyahu did say is that they're going to continue to put Hamas under fire, while this offensive goes on, and negotiations will still happen all at the same time. How realistic is it for Hamas to still come to the table as this offensive is happening inside of Gaza?
In life, you need to choose between the best option, not the ultimate option. And the Israeli side believe is that if they will push hard enough the Hamas by force, the Hamas will understand that their future, every day that will go on, their situation will be worse. If this is the case, if this is the way that they will see it, they might come to the conclusion that to cut their losses, they need to go to any kind of agreement and to release hostages. Is it realistic? I'm not so sure, because I'm not so sure that the Hamas thinking is logic. The Hamas thinking is very different from the Israeli logic, and they might think that as bad as it is, it's better for them. Unless they will believe that the hostages have no value for Israel.
Thank you so much for your perspective and joining us today.
You're welcome.
As we move forward, for the first time in 2 months, the Houthis launched a ballistic missile at Israel. Although it was successfully intercepted, the Iran-backed group vows to expand their targets in Israel until the war in Gaza ends. ILTV's Aria Lachiani has more.
In a significant escalation, Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels have declared they will intensify attacks against Israel following the resumption of fighting in Gaza. The Houthis have launched their first ballistic missile at Israel since the January ceasefire, intercepted by Israel's air defense system over Saudi Arabia. While no casualties were reported, the attack triggered alarms throughout southern Israel, sending thousands running for shelter.
ونحن نؤكده اليوم ونؤكد على أننا سنستأنف التصعيد في أعلى مستوياته ضد العدو الإسرائيلي، وسنعمل كل ما نستطيعه ضد العدو الإسرائيلي ولنصرة الشعب الفلسطيني ونتصدى لأي مساندة أمريكية لاستهداف بلدنا، مساندة للعدو الإسرائيلي والاستهداف لبلدنا.
The Houthis military spokesman Yahya Saree also announced the group targeted Israel's Nevatim airbase with a ballistic missile and warned of further strikes unless Israel halts its aerial campaign in Gaza. The Houthi attack comes after Israel's surprise offensive late Monday night into Tuesday morning. The Hamas-led health ministry in Gaza says more than 400 people were killed, although the number does not distinguish between civilians and terrorists. Meanwhile, the United States has launched its largest military operation in the Middle East under President Donald Trump, targeting Houthi leadership and key figures. The strikes reportedly killed 53 people and wounded 98 more. The Houthis have been attacking Israel and maritime traffic since late 2023 in what they claim is solidarity with Gaza. The situation now remains highly volatile, with threats of continued attacks from Yemen as the conflict between Israel and Hamas rages on.
Israel's aero defense system faced its biggest test yet this year, intercepting over 100 missiles from Iran. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman sits down in an exclusive interview with the CEO of a major defense company who helped develop the system.
The Houthis launched a rocket at Israel on Tuesday night, ignoring U.S. President Donald Trump's warning that any attack by the Yemenite militants would be seen as Iranian aggression and met with great force. Israel and the U.S. have threatened a direct strike on Iran's oil or nuclear sites since Iran launched 2 massive missile attacks in April and October, firing hundreds of projectiles at Israel that could have devastated military sites and caused casualties. Fortunately, Israel's aero defense system, developed by Israel Aerospace Industries, or IAI, intercepted the missiles.
Prepared. We knew that the system is very well tested. We knew that we have the best technology, but we never faced the real threat yet. And when more than 100 missiles arrived from Iran toward Israel, attacking a populated area, it was a moment of concern, but we knew that everything would work. And after a few seconds, when we saw the first interceptor launched toward the threat, we knew that it would be okay.
Last week, ILTV visited IAI to explore its latest technology and financial growth. The company's net income surged 55% last year, reaching $493 million in 2024. ILTV also sat down for an exclusive interview with IAI CEO Boaz Levy, a key figure in the development of the aero defense system more than 3 decades ago. The Arrow 2 and 3 systems are regularly deployed and were the secret behind Israel's success in April and October. Now, IAI is finalizing the Arrow 4, designed to enhance missile interception at both high and low altitudes.
As well, so we'll be able to do a shoot, look, shoot mechanism in order to encounter any threats. Of course, that the technology had been changed, the threat had been changed, and we are putting a lot of new features in these interceptors.
The aero defense system was originally developed in response to a question from the late U.S. President Ronald Reagan. He asked, "Can you hit a bullet with a bullet?"
And it was like a technological answer to a future problem of intercepting ballistic missiles. Nobody thought about a scenario like we had in Iran. Nobody thought about a synchronized salvo that we had at that night of April 14. But the system were designed robust enough. And this robustness gave us the solution of intercepting so many incoming missiles.
And what about the threats ahead? Levy told ILTV he's confident his engineers are pushing the boundaries, developing next-level defense capabilities.
I believe that company like IAI, Israel Aerospace Industries, that are leading this effort for the last 35 years or so, have the responsibility to predict the future. And our current engineers working these days about the future capabilities, giving us the new design for the new types of threats that will appear in the near and far future. So it's a matter of understanding of the capabilities of the threats and trying to design the right and optimal solution for that, looking toward the full scenario from acquiring the threat till the interception of it.
And now an exciting opportunity for our viewers. Join ILTV and Afeka College of Engineering in Tel Aviv for Breaking the Code, an exclusive deep dive into the educational skills and industry connections shaping the next generation of innovators. This isn't just a virtual conference, it's a chance to hear from some of the most influential leaders in Israel's high-tech ecosystem, including Uri Levine, founder of Waze, and Eugene Kandel, chairman of the board of the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Don't miss out. Register now for this special one-hour event by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Now, Israel's cabinet has unanimously approved the reinstatement of Itamar Ben-Gvir as national security minister, according to the prime minister's office. He opposed the ceasefire and hostage prisoner release with Hamas and resigned because of it. Now, Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara opposed Ben-Gvir's return, citing legal concerns. While no details were given, past disputes have centered on his interference in police operations and alleged politicization of promotions, issues the High Court and previously warned against him. The Knesset also had to approve the decision and is expected to do so today. Now, in related news, around 40,000 people turned out to Tel Aviv to protest a pending decision by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to fire Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar. If it was one of the largest protests against the government in recent months. And a fascinating project and series called Voices from Gaza is highlighting life under Hamas rule through the eyes of real Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip, exposing the abuses, disparities, and silencing that they endure. A nonprofit called the Center for Peace Communications is helping their perspectives come to life and the future they see for themselves after the war in their own words. Take a listen.
بالنسبة لموضوع المساعدات اللي بيتم عملها يعني مع حماس، للأسف هاي المساعدات ما بيتم توزيعها بشكل عادل. توزيع المساعدات بيتم بشكل عنصري بحيث انه افراد حماس فقط هم اللي بيتلقوا المساعدات، بالاضافه الى انه احنا شفنا المساعدات هاي تباع في الاسواق بيع، يعني نلاقي معلبات مكتوب على العلبه ليست للبيع.
لها سافر. انا من عندها سافر لانه هان ما ضلش حياه. هان الحياه انعدمت. يعني طلع انت المنظر ما ضلش حياه هان بالمره. انا بطلب من ترامب نفسه يهجرنا زي ما طلب. وانا هبقى اول واحد ههاجر.
Truly such a fascinating project, having to hear these perspectives. It's really critical. Now, joining us to discuss the project is Joseph Brody, founder and president of the Center for Peace Communications. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Josh. My pleasure.
Now, you're speaking with Palestinians on the ground who are providing their unfiltered perspective so the world can hear the truth of what life is like under Hamas rule. What is the reality of living in Gaza like?
Well, Gazans have been suffering under Hamas rule for a generation, and a great many of them want a different future. Some of them were brave enough to take to the streets and demonstrate against Hamas in 2019, 1,000 of them, and then again in July of 2023, braving gunfire and prison. And that sentiment has only grown as Gazans increasingly blame Hamas for triggering a war that has brought destruction on them and their lives.
Now, we heard in one of the clips we played a young man talking about wanting to actually be relocated, suggesting he agreed with what President Trump said about his plan for Gaza. Trump's plan has, of course, been met with rejection by the Arab League. What do Palestinians on the ground really want for their own future?
Well, the Palestinian polling showed that on the eve of October 7th, over a third of Palestinians wanted to emigrate. That's a third of the population at a time when there was still a semblance of continuity in daily life. Now, in light of the destruction of homes, infrastructure, and absence of opportunity, it's become quite clear that a majority of Gazans would voluntarily emigrate if given the opportunity. And as far as President Trump's plan, that's not an endorsement of the so-called Riviera plan in and of itself. However, in as much as what he's offering is an opportunity to migrate and find safe haven elsewhere, there are a whole lot of Gazans who want to take him up on it.
And American and Israeli officials have said since October 7th, if Hamas gave back the hostages, there would be no more war. Now, officials have offered Palestinians a safe passage out if they do have any information in sharing regarding the hostages. And we know some hostages have actually been held in civilian areas and homes. Is there a reason why no Palestinian has come forward with information about these hostages and where they're being held?
Who said no Palestinians have come forward to help? To the contrary, it's clear that informants within Gaza are a crucial component of Israel's efforts both to prosecute its war and to look for hostages. They wouldn't necessarily be advertising their role in assisting. However, it's meanwhile the case that Hamas has been rounding up and shooting alleged quote-unquote collaborators. Now, of course, some of that may be bogus, much of it, in fact, but it reflects the fact that they know that many Gazans will help any power that is committed to unseating Hamas, and they're ultimately afraid of Gazans' role in helping get them out.
Yeah, it's so fascinating what you said about the informants, right? Because we know that Israeli intelligence actually knows where some of these hostages are located. Now, Joseph, there's been renewed fighting in Gaza after Israeli officials said Hamas rejected several offers to continue the ceasefire and release of the hostages. What are Palestinians in Gaza now saying after the last 2 days of airstrikes?
They are infuriated at Hamas. They want these hostages to be released because they want an end to their own suffering. They want an end to the war. And they understand that Israel is pursuing those hostages. And they also understand that Hamas is holding on to them in order to hold on to power at the cost of the Palestinians who are dying in the course of the conflict. So we are seeing Gazans, and we're giving them an opportunity to speak for themselves in media interviews, who are demanding that Hamas release the hostages and demanding that they leave their positions of authority and voluntarily end their reign of terror in the Gaza Strip.
Amazing insight. Really appreciate it. These are perspectives we don't often hear, so thanks so much for bringing that to the table for us today.
My pleasure.
Israeli actress Gal Gadot has cemented her place in Hollywood history, becoming the first Israeli actor to achieve a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The ceremony celebrated her journey from a small-town girl in Rosh Hashanah to an international icon. And speaking at the event, Gadot addressed her fans and family, even speaking in Hebrew to express her love for them despite the distance. She shared an empowering message for young people, saying if a girl from Rosh Hashanah can get a star on Hollywood Boulevard, anything is possible. Accompanied by her husband and 4 daughters, Gadot joked about how her success always seemed to coincide with her pregnancies, calling motherhood her greatest privilege. While the ceremony was largely celebratory, it drew around 24 protesters chanting anti-Israel slogans, met by a pro-Israel group of a smaller size. And despite the controversy, Gadot's achievements remain a milestone, marking her star as the 2,804th dedicated on the Walk of Fame. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of around 13 degrees Celsius or 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see rainy showers alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 15 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, ILTV.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Shosh Bedrosian. Thanks so much for watching.